right. Let's start with a praise to Manjushri. Obeisance to Maguru and Protector Manjushri, who holds in his heart a scriptural text embodies of the things or things as they are, whose understanding shines forth as the sun unclouded by defilements or traces of ignorance, who teaches in 60 ways with the patience love of a father for his only son. All creatures caught in the prison of samsara, confused in the darkness of their ignorance, overwhelmed by their suffering. Uses stronger thunder, proclamation of the Dhamma arises from the stupor of our delusions and frees us from the iron chains of our karma, whose powerful sword of wisdom hews our sufferings wherever its sprouts appear, clearing away the darkness of all ignorance. Antrichu and Manjushri's princely body is adorned with the 112 marks of a Buddha, who has completed the 10 stages, achieving the highest perfection of a Bodhisattva, who has been pure from the beginning. O Manjushri, O loving one, with the brilliance of your wisdom, illuminate the darkness enclosing my mind, enlighten my intelligence and wisdom so I may gain insight into the Buddha's words and the texts that explain them. Sashi Poki Junshi Meto Tamri Rablikshi Nidegen Padi Sangye Shindo Mikte Owa Irokunamda Shinla Chuparasho Idang
Gurana Mendalaga Niyadayami Sanji Chedan Tsojin Chonala Chanchu Bardu Dandi Kapsun Dagi Chushi Gibi Tsonungi Dola Benshi Sanji Druparasho Sanji Chedan Tsojin Chonala Chanchu Bardu Dandi Kapsun Dagi Chushi Gibi Tsonungi Dola Benshi Sanji Druparasho Sanji Chedan Tsoji Chonala Chanchu Bardu Dami Kyabsunchi Dagi Chushi Gibi Tsonungi Dola Benchi Sanji Druparasho Kangi Tuzinye Zone Tawa Tongji Bambi Cheru Tambi Chun Tenze Kwadam Tela Changse Lo. Good morning everyone. Cousin Samdi, Losha, cousin Samdi, Shinjimal over Druba said, Shinjimal over Druba, Sumba Shinjimal over Druba, Shodan Shibje Jugni.
All right, let's go back to the text and pick up from verse 139, looking at where we are in the outline, first off. So we've been looking at a summary of the explanation of the exchange of self with others. The third point in verse 139 is practicing unerringly.
Teresa Dena Simjin Zu Chete, Dagulula Gentoma, Teda Ten and Tronitia, Shandalan and Pember Church.
If sentient beings should be taken as principle, whatever I behold upon my body, I should appropriate and use for the benefit of others.
Teresa di Carson, Takazin to the ya, and Jertan, Dogoras, Gunzen Tena said, Gunzen Tena, Gunzen Carres Laundi, rangi lunga yisum ani shen la person bayanza ani shen gi chedo peju chegor mado ani shen gi chedo majeba rangi chedo peju chebayana logba res logba inza che rig mares ro yunzen tena ani shen zur chechindi ani dag lulaya khumbi ko ani chik sela soba digitamje 다 좋나 아니 디트로즈니 젠 파 아니 진고야디 가서다 젠 진고야디 테니 남다레스 로츠 마레스 디라
Now, in practicing unerringly here, we offer our body, speech, and mind for others to use. As we have committed ourselves to work for the benefit of others, to act for the benefit of others, we are offering our body, speech, and mind for others. So if we then use them for ourselves, that would be a mistake. That would be an error. It is not right for me to do so. It is not suitable for me to do that. So, for example, when we look at activities of body, speech, and mind, like, for example, physical actions, if we have food, for example, then we take it for ourselves and provide others with that food, give it to others. So this way of practicing is correct. It is not a wrong way of practicing.
제베나 균제 테나 심진기 텐소르 체디 세고서 다길룰라 진통와 테데테네 랑라 촉니 짱데스 다긴 점바살니 다크른 점바살니 심진 샹달라는 펜버초버 탱기 지 세고론초바터 템바메제바 차오스.
The commentary says, for this reason, having to put the purpose of sentient beings first, one views without forgetfulness the food, clothing, and others that one observes as one's body as having been stolen from others, giving up grasping at these objects as mine. One uses them for their benefit, as a servant would use food, clothing, and other of the master.
다니바 다시 제니 sambi distribute sulanis. Yes.
All right. Before we go on, just wanted to maybe clarify one thing. So, in Lama Tsongkhapa's Lamrim Chema, when it says that when the practice of equalizing, exchanging self for others is explained, it is said that one does not become others and others do not become oneself. But then still, when we look at the instructions here in that Shantideva gives, it seems that it does say that we need to adopt the attitude that we are others. Like, for example, when we look at verse 112, in verse 112, it says, in the same way, why should I be unable to apprehend the bodies of others as I? It is not difficult to posit my body also as others. So it seems that Shantideva does say that you replace self with others, whereas Lama Tsongkhapa says that you don't do that, you just exchange self-cherishing with cherishing others. So I was wondering if Geshe could clarify that. Did I Shoktang Sungya Gupchugo Dunro?
Gupchugo,
Ani Tikshe Gyatan Chunila Deshin Shengi Lulayang Dachi Chi Chimisung Dagi Lunish Shen
Shendado.
This ashdoa. Tadi kabdila shiwale karesungi yosaresena dasya di soso chipo tola samlo matamaje dasya di senchin tam che tola samlo chitang dagi lusya di soso lu chipo tola samlo matang shengi lu chapsan den the samlo chitana den the sungi doa.
Ani
ine tadi dakshin nyamje se di nyamnen di Geshe gyabdo jerim boche lanen chemola karesum gyoresena dakshin jeba se di dakshin macha chagi mares shen da chagi mares
re
the tikche den de waina dakshen chago gres the samlo tango mar
di ingi mare da shen cha yo marwada pigi ge tanda tsikje di ge shen gi lula ya da chi chi cher mozon set tsikje ga ni ge chu ni ge shen gi lula ya nge lu se na shen gi chede di karchin yon tu mares tila gores ro kanzina ane pami kodaki la ya rangi namshi shuni kombi wangi tela ya ngi lu segi ane chede chiya yungu doas ane di nanshingi shengi lu la ya rangi lu nanshingi pe ane dagdo sonchi ni chede chiya di komdi tenba ya na shende tsachimu rangi lu nanshingi komdi yung chogores dila gores tanda dila
so shengi lu dagi lu samlo ta di nagi lu ngune sangi mare ya mara chite cha chikpo den
ngone samgo marta susu be shayad karsan phami khuda di an susu lu marwas ine thela mingne ani be the phami khuda de susu lu di ingwa dili tribi dilia ngi lu se ga cha chimu jiya jing dos de nang shin shin tola sam dawe na shin lu di ngi lu zangris lago marta shin lu dilia pe ani susu lu nang shin ki ani chete che karchini yungo mares yung chogres la warda
tingon la dakshen nyamba se adila Geshe kare chi gyayo res na daksya di minsam res tokpa daksya di dakshi la tene tokpa res ching sondwa ani nga so di komri chayo res ani shen la dende yang komri chayo res tanda nga so komri saba chi sungwa ina daksya di shen la tene ta res samlo tawa ina chizan di an dakshen chagi marbe
ma dashi di call de bigi dashi nyam se di nyam sul di ani tokbe takzang yumba nyam sul gusun shagmanda da shen nyam ba di deva dungam deva nyam ba gibi dashi nyam ba di didru go resta dashi
ine baga chila shiwa le kare sungyo res na daksya di tokpa tsam res min tsam res chizan di daksya di shen tsama dende tola sanlo tawa ina komri chawa ina ani daksya di shenda senchin tamche din tola samlo tan yores
daku nyam biloch
re
tingi mare
so first of all Geshe said that why would I not be able to think of others as I? This is what verse 112 says. In the same way, why should I be unable to apprehend the bodies of others as I? So here Geshe reckons that in the same way that we think of our body and cherish the body, we take care of the body, we cherish the body, why would we not be able to cherish the bodies of others? So rather than thinking that the bodies of others are my body, Geshe reckons that the meaning here in the practice of equalizing self with others is why would I not be able to care for the bodies of others and cherish the bodies of others in the same way that I care for and cherish my own body? After all, when we think of my body, we became habituated to think of this body as my body, although the things that produce this body were other. So the things that produce this body were the sperm and ovum that came from my father and mother. And although those things are other than mine, we, through a process of familiarity, came to think of this body as mine. And through that, we care for the body, we cherish the body. So why would we not be able then to care for for others' body in the same way? Then I continue with my question and said, it seems that before Shantideva said that when we use the convention I, I is merely imputed. It is merely imputed independence. And since that Shantideva is saying that since it is merely imputed independence, why would we not impute I on others? So it seems that it does imply that you think that I is someone else or I is another. Geshe, I wonder if that is really the case.
제 베나 파미 쿠달라야 아니 콤비왕기 니 루세치 니 루세치 랍치니 제데치에 용고도스 드난신기 심진 샬라미니 니 심진 슬랍치 베나 니 심진 로 아니 니마 오 딘디기 아니 제데치에 콤디용 초그레스 아 다기 제데치세야디 다기 다지 자와 찌모송세 다기 피기 아니 콜 다기 니 아니 다기 마 다기 심진스 랍지 아니 비 다도 송친 로 아니 찌디치 니 르리스 라운디 슈찌디치 용도스 어디나지 용 초그레스 어디라고레스 모두 피기 심진신 그 루디 아니 니 루스니 징고르세다 심진신들이야 나오냐 로치고스디 라고 말레스
We care for the body, we cherish the body, we care for the body as my body, the one that came from this sperm and ovum of our father and mother. So then, in the same way that we care for my body, Shantideva says, why would we not be able to habituate our mind with caring for my mother, for example, for the body of my mother, in the same way that I care for my body. So when we think of the bodies of my friend, my friends, my relatives, my mothers, and so forth, we could care for them in the same way that we care for our body through a process of familiarity. And this is the point that Shantideva is making here. So in the same way, why should I be unable to apprehend the bodies of others as I? So not just apprehend them, but to care for them, to cherish them as I would cherish my own body.
아니 딕스 또 야 먼저 비기기 균데 맹아동 고미야 고버츠디 비기기 치디기 만한신기 아니 틴징기 마이바 촌나 아니 디체도 아니 칼리갸투야티 아니 셈게 투야디 용구레스 라고라스 디데 찍바도지 비기 마이바 따고스 라고 말디네 니 베나 아니 니 로마레스라나 미세기 제와지 용해도스 드나신 니기페 아니 경고야 아니 심진이 삼삼 진바이나 나라랑기 경고야 소고야 심진이 삼삼도 진바이나 아니 델이야 아니 제와 용초로 왔어 니 루스 랍친 제와 용나 아니 니 심진 레스 랍친 제와 용무쳐 문도 왔어.
In the sevenfold cause and effect personal instructions for developing bodhicitta, we recognize sentient beings as having been our mothers. And the point is that we don't think about them as necessarily as our mothers now, but the idea is that we want to then develop the recognition that in the same way that our mother has shown us great kindness in this life, also other sentient beings have shown us great kindness in other lifetimes when they acted as our mother. So then when we think of sentient beings as my mother, it's a way of thinking that turns our mind towards the great kindness that sentient beings have shown to us. So in the same way that we then think of this is my body, we can think of other sentient beings as also my body in some sense, not in actually thinking that they are me or that they are my body, but as recognizing that in the same way that I care for my body, I can also care for other living beings or other sentient beings.
Yeah. Ta dajin jene sambe jesu dribi tsulani temba dang shebo tambo dor temba ni men so dag tu cheba dang jeni dun da chene namdo mebi semgisu chagdo ndenda ngar gilgoms.
In the extensive explanation, we've covered the explanation of the way to exchange self with others. Now we move on to the second point, which explains the way to practice after having reflected on this exchange. It begins with verse 140 that gives us a brief presentation, and then the extensive explanation is given after that. Let's begin with the summary of the way to practice after having reflected on this exchange in verse 140. Taking someone inferior and so forth to be himself, and taking himself to be the other. A Bodhisattva should meditate upon envy, competitiveness, and pride with a mind free of conceptualization.
데르다 잔주산비의 심진 랑리 멤버다 냠바다 랑리 사버소 미유도 제네 아니 다도 제바당스 다니 셴예도 제데 다진준 준비로 고사뼈네 녜시 총데 태좀기 남도 메비 아니 샘기수 다진 제오곰비 잔주산발 hen진이나 렌젠테 타도다 미냠바 젠섬다 멤버이나 ngargergomba chawas.
Here in this verse, it says, Bodhisattvas focus on other sentient beings that are lower, equal, and superior, and take them as self, and hold the self as other. Having thus exchanged the focus of grasping at the self and others, one should induce certainty and meditate if the meditating Bodhisattva's name is Devadatta, with a mind free from doubting thoughts on jealousy for Devadatta, competitiveness if equal, and pride is lower.
Tichilona yabudu. Dikitagi tichilodara. Sikchi tigin dewa yorum chig sonjagiti.
All right, so Isana Siddharama in his commentary says that we regard in this practice those that are lower than us, those that are equal to us, and those that are higher than us. So we put them on one side. Then we take ourself as a person that cherishes ourself on the other side, right? So we have two sides: others, lower, equal, and higher on one side, and we, a self-cherishing being, on the other side. Then oneself with an impartial mind. So we analyze ourselves with an impartial mind. And when we do that, we see that, just a second. And so as we do that, we draw closer to sentient beings, which are so vast in number. So the whole purpose in doing that is to, in a mind, to draw closer to sentient beings, which are vast and extensive. So, for example, when we look at those who are lower than us, there is a vast number of sentient beings which are lower than us. So we put ourselves in their shoes, in a sense that we take their position. We now take the position that we are amongst a group of those that are lower than us, and then we look at the person that we've been before, right? Ourself, which is higher than those lower sentient beings, right? So if we are on, let's say, on the right-hand side, and those who are lower than us on the left-hand side, we take the position of the low ones on the left-hand side and look up to the other person that is we ourselves, that is higher than that. And then we cultivate a sense of sense of jealousy for that person. Now, when we focus on those who are equal to us, we develop with respect, focusing on those who are equal to us, we develop a sense of competitiveness. And when when we then consider the one who is higher or lower than us, we develop pride. So it seems that this is the way that we train our mind with those three attitudes: jealousy, competitiveness, and pride. So we exchange our positions. We put ourselves in somebody else's shoes and then look at the person that we were before. And in this way, cultivate jealousy, competitiveness, and pride. The logo way. Okay.
Terganjit dige kosa jin ra rangi kosa la ya simjen tamje sha penada ji ani susu desa jida ani simjen tamje desa ki chogni ro swechini ani rang desa de ya simjen shen sha simjen shen desa de ya rang shan penada tiri ani ji pigi simjen shen la ya chong de gi dunga di ani ji susu le chong yo ba na ani khanda ji sare samsam ki logic takji jikje rang la chongyi ani kharsota o dinti ge pasu ani kanji loi kosa je set loi kosa je na samlu stamba ina ani chanyam ge samlot dewa choma nigal chonggo ba dunga mena nigal megobe ge ani chanyam ge samlo di ketugo yores tel tembi ge ani tamje dunga de tan chimaro nyambe ge ani soso nanshin ge bi ani shen la ya jinjing samlo di yong tu gres ro the dusungores so.
So the main point that Shantideva teaches here is to come to cherish all living beings in the following way. So mentally, we exchange our position with others. So for example, if we sit here in this space now, we're going to place all sentient beings in this place. And instead, we put ourselves at the place of other sentient beings. So this is why I said kind of you enter the shoes of others, and then others, you put them in your shoes. So then as you mentally exchange those perspectives, thinking yourself in others' shoes, and then put them in your shoes, you develop equality between yourself and others in thinking that, for example, if I'm happy, may all sentient beings be happy. If there is an absence of suffering, may all sentient beings have an absence of suffering or no suffering at all. So through that mental exchange, when we put ourselves in the shoes of others and then in our shoes, we come to cherish other living beings.
Tadinma yungosa da nibala shis geba sheba de ya towala thagdo gomsul ta nyambala densum gomsu membala ngargir gomsu gombi drebu was tatambun towala thagdo gomsla ondi towala thagdo gomsla ondi pigi rangda shen bu pigi taji kabde chin debi kala ya sosu shengi chola ya dechini ani rang di chi ani shenli pigi ani towan zambada chi dinti la ya ani thagdo gomchin kanji sosu shengi chola deni ani chi rangla chuya thagdo gomchu ji yungdu wes ra sosu shenla ya mingni thagdo kiye joros denan shengi sosu shengi sal deni rangla chu ani thagdo gomchu chi dena ani sosu gyuji shenla ya mingbi thagdo de chong droyagda pendo yunguyosara was disunguyosara isra.
Let's look at the extensive explanation of the way to practice after having reflected on this exchange. So we have 4 points to that section. The way jealousy for those higher than oneself is cultivated. All right, then the way competitiveness is cultivated between those equal to oneself, then the way pride over those lower than oneself is cultivated, and finally the effects of cultivation. Let's begin with the way jealousy for those higher than oneself is cultivated. There are 2 points to this section. The way it is cultivated and how it is practiced once it has been cultivated. So, as we said, we put ourselves in others' shoes and then put others in our shoes. So suppose that currently, before we do that exchange, we are in a position that is higher than others. So now, normally we, in general, we have jealousy with respect to some beings. Now, as we put ourselves in the shoes of those who are lower than us, and we look at the person that we were before, then jealousy from the side of sentient beings who are lower than us is developed towards what they view as someone that is higher than them. So when we recognize that just as we are jealous of others, others are jealous of ourselves, Geshe reckons that it is a way of reducing our own jealousy.
Da gombitsu da gomni chedar tubitsulu tambu gombitsu kareslamdi din kurchi danmin din kurchi danmin deje dagi manyeje din deje dalame dede dagi dungala dani lenum chebata din devani du nes.
So we begin with the first 6 lines, beginning with verse 141. He is honored, but we are not. We have not found possessions as he has. He is praised, but we are disparaged. He is happy, but we suffer. We do the work while he abides in comfort.
Da man senshiro shachini ani shion da sulajana do da linjil jardo chanju sambal linjin rani gi dajin jeo gombitse ro pigita chanju sambal chanju sambal opsan chanju sambal ta kama karla vaina ro ani rani gi dajin jeo gombitse ani rani deni shengi kurdi chela simjin dadu sonni dani yonde membe kurdi cheba menos ta diris samdang goris ral.
Looking at the commentary to the first 6 lines, it says, when the Bodhisattva Devadatta, we can, here we just give one example of someone that we use for the sake of exchange. So you can replace the Bodhisattva Devadatta with other names, with the Bodhisattva Kama, or with the Bodhisattva such and such. So when the Bodhisattva Devadatta meditates on exchanging self and other, Devadatta is praised by others. But having taken sentient beings as self, one is of lower qualities and will not be praised.
The Malo saying that Linjin Dishin, that Devi Yoshi Maniji. Chansum Linjin din Tuberchella, Daja Sunjan Nam Pedo. Di Dela, Daja Nam Dungala, Danu Kurkevalo Sobi, Lenam Chebata, Linjin din Devani the Nesos.
One does not find necessities for happiness in the same way as Devadatta, and although the Bodhisattva Devadatta is praised, one, the sentient being, are criticized. He is happy and we sentient beings have suffering. We have to do the work of caring, but Devadatta abides happily.
The do see on the pig Ranyela, and Tsukalon, the kanji Raniel Tsukalon do stay on the energy Chado Geobadoch, kanji Maron Bachik, and Tonyagi Kokobjik, then the Shargos race.
Marwan said the Sumarwan,
Susu
Ramarwan.
Marwa.
Which means that here we use this technique in order to, rather than look at others, we look at ourselves. We look at ourselves and see how, in some ways, we become the object of jealousy of others. Which means that with respect to yourself, there's something that is not suitable.
Terda di chagdo gomsu peshi insare. Tenda da ngargir gomba. Ngargir gomba said peshi mendo. Din jigden la cheda. Dame yonde maybe tak yonde maybe chishikcha. Dagu yonde dembani kawin deme teji. Kawin dangcho ten years.
이 페이지 저도 이게 섭제디
Chagdo
저 섭제디 교로요 말아.
Okay. Yeah.
Continuing with the reading of this verse, it says, he is renowned as great in this world, but we as inferior with no good qualities. We have no good qualities. What to do? All of us are to be endowed with good qualities. There are those in comparison to whom he is inferior, and there are those in comparison to whom we are supreme.
Re chanchu samba deni jigden la Tsultrim da Tsoba soji chewara chakpa tang da memba da yonde meba chako. Dayan kyojin bebe yonde druba yinla daja simjen namjen yonde mebi chishik cha. Daja simjen kun yonde da denba nidun bebe drubar chao. Di tola daja memba yang dosa döne shaba yinbe yonde chelabe kansa kanwe chansam de member te yojin simjen member kanwe da chodu gywa ten yobe daja simjen nam shumbachi muguji bebe chanju drobo nyamdu shen dadu sonu gombar chavos la ngarge gombar sonu jredo
Indeed, 저도.
yeah loksan digta.
So in continuing with the reading of this section where the Vedanta is placing himself in the shoes of those who are lower than him and look at himself from their perspective, it says this Bodhisattva is greatly renowned in the transitory worlds for his ethics, listening, and so forth. But I'm known for inferiority and a lack of qualities. Through effort, you achieve qualities, but what should we, the sentient beings without qualities, do? We shall all practice to become endowed with qualities. That we are low and he is high is posited relative to each other. Those people with superior qualities, such as this Bodhisattva, has someone that is inferior, and those that are inferior, such as myself, have someone that is superior. Therefore, there is no need for us sentient beings to be discouraged, and we should practice with effort for complete enlightenment. One should meditate on holding others and self by thinking in this way.
Yondem maybe chishik chaset. Dachanam shumba chameri sunni yondem maybe chishikcha. Dagu yonden dembani kawen dime teuji kawen daksho ten yose. Tandadi ngani tanda sumje nyu saksamki. Digi sigan tamadi tamas yondem maybe chishikcha sebani kawen daksho ten yose pardu ani ngargir gomsulaya jashas.
His Honor's commentary is slightly different. He looks at verse 143, which says, we have no good qualities, what to do? all of us are to be endowed with good qualities. He is honest, seems to explain this section in relation to the way to develop pride with respect to those that are lower.
어디래 간지 아니 쉼바생이디 아니 가드는 게닝 말했어. 라 쉼바 가드는 게닝 말했어. 쉼바 기에 유견되지 랑라에 연된 매버도 단지 람 멤버인 버도 아니 지 가서다 어딘디기 아니 균전 딘디 손체네 아니 쉼바기네 아니 배 수수수 배 아니 냠마부 제자저라스 디친 진행 말했어. 그 아니 연대 유메세디아 그 겐지 돈 연구열에 견생에 대한 그 겐지 뜬 레벨을 마도 토마메바니 견 그대가 이렇게 말해 왔어. 딘자 딘딜 상담이 아니 나르길 공거래서
아기야만 타도.
이게 여론 시는 나르길에서.
So the section says that do not always remain discouraged. So we sometimes find ourselves in a situation where we are rendered despondent. We become so discouraged in thinking that we are so inferior to others. We have no qualities whatsoever, to the point in which sometimes we become so despondent that we render ourselves to be incapable of doing anything about our situation. But here Shantideva says, you need to adopt a relative state of mind in which you think that, well, it might be that in relation to others, we are lowers, but in relation to someone else, we have better qualities. So after all, it's not that primordially we are bereft of qualities and we are all only faulty. It's not that since time with that beginning, we have only faults and that's the way that it will stay. It's actually a situation is relative. So in that way, we can develop pride. Now, although in the outline that we use from Geta Dhammarincha's commentary, this section belongs to developing jealousy with respect to those who are higher than oneself. It seems that it's honest, and Dalai Lama explains that with developing pride with respect to those who are lower than oneself.
Di tola dakcha member yang dosa la döne shaba imbes yonden chelabi kanza kanwe chanju semba di member di yeji simje member kanwe da chok kyoba ten yobes daja simje namgi shumba che mugugi shumgo maris landa ani chado keshigo marita shumgo maris karne chetuk을 쌈비기 아니 로또봉 나게스키 고르스 라고라 잔주드바 차오스.
In the commentary, it says, one point that comes up in the commentary says that we are low, and is high is positive relative to each other. Those people with superior qualities, such as this Bodhisattva, has someone that is inferior, and those that are inferior, such as myself, have someone that is superior. Therefore, there is no need for us sentient beings to be discouraged, and we should practice with effort for complete enlightenment. Which means that we should develop a sense of pride. We should develop a sense of confidence in our ability to do that.
냠도 신다도 손을 공부죠. 수tum도 따와 냠보 소. 기 왕기 장성 현진리 코멘 셰나스. 수tum 따와 고소는 니무도지 다와면스 비기다지 멤버인 뭐 심고 말레스. 그 겐지 또지레마도 기 말레스. 수tum도 따와 냠바 다 소유 고버서 따와도 좁아 냠바네 lower nimu to yinji dani jin debi on the ki kemenos yana kamba the lower nimu minshi denosa.
Now, to complete this section of the commentary, the following argument is put forward. You are lower than the Bodhisattva Devadatta due to degenerated ethics and view. To answer that, the degenerated ethics and view faults due to lifestyle and so forth, i.e. degenerated view and action, are due to the power of adventitious mental afflictions and not faults I created purposefully under my own power. Now, sorry, one thing that I failed to read is the first two lines from verse 144. So this argument and answer are in relation to the first two lines from verse 144. Let's look at that. The morality view and woes are not under our control, but due to the force of afflictions.
Niba gomni chidar dibi tsurs gomni chidar dibi tsurnes chinu dan su gudi nebo wan dagi tandula wende dan di su shimi chishe dala niba che dala te yondin ji chishen dada yondin chins.
Now, the second point in the section that explains the way jealousy for those had and oneself is cultivated is how it is practiced once it has been cultivated. Again, there are 6 lines that we begin with. And it says, he must heal us in whatever way is able to, and willingly we must accept any harm involved. However, we are not his subject of healing, so why does he belittle us? What use are his good qualities to us? He has good qualities.
Tedadi kalaya tatan tambuni chansam lenjin sedi sozo yimbi want tangoras ra chansam lenje sozo chansam lenje rangi ani chokchile de ani simjan tamji chokchile shani ta rangi simjan tamji gi ani tsabchechine chansam lenjin ya tsu ta keja diriro ra rangi la tsu keja diriro shegoras ra chansam lenjin kyo nyinji de dembayina chinnu gi 아니 간주 심전 탐지 다니 켜기 고바 수고데스 다사디 심전 탐지를 샤친 심전 탐지 켜기 고바 수고데 연된 리비까지 네버와 다기 탄들랑 고소스 계란 라.
So then again, how should we think in this practice? So remind yourself that here in this explanation, you're Devadatta. You're the Bodhisattva Devadatta. Now you're putting yourself on one side and other sentient beings on the other. And then you look at yourself from their perspective. In that sense, you put yourself in their shoes and then look at yourself. So if you're a Bodhisattva and you are a compassionate person, looking at yourself from their perspective, Bodhisattva Devadatta, they say, if you have compassion, then you have to work as much as possible to repair my faults, and I need to accept the harm that the harm of the austerities to establishing qualities.
dirda daja namsla ondi ganju simjan tamji doj lagor ani lenjin de ranyero simjan tamji gi ranyela tsu ganju kerang suesha mardas ra kerang longche mares ra ganju tan nam ginding gi sambalaya chi pigila khan tombati chi sosu longche sosu keben druech ani chedu samdangoras tikaleta ranchin zinglo shukchewang ta dimaimba simjin sheng kosala deni ranye simjin sheng kosala deni ani ran su kejan dindi shebana ro ani chodi le tugres simja tamji chidi chiguya chodi simja tamji khala gore ran su nganzu kerang soja mares pemdo na jishe daja nganzu 아니 심전 남라 인케란 가지는 예 아니 녀부지 치기어레스 녀부치스 다라 찬섬 디 연딘기 제자 찬섬 렌진디 다니 연딘지 이야 다자 심전 남라 펜바메비소스 티 케란기 케란리야 비 나게 댄섬 케란리 연딘 여바 균젠도 제니 심전 셴리야 아니 간주 심전리야 never chewena kera yonde yobadu koche masons.
So when we as the Bodhisattva Devadatta put ourselves in somebody else's shoes and look at ourselves from their perspective, it says, as a Bodhisattva, they say, as a Bodhisattva, you should have compassion. You are a compassionate Bodhisattva. That is the case, then you have to work as much as possible to repair my faults, and I need to accept the harm of the austerities to establishing qualities. If we sentient beings do not come into the benefit of having our faults repaired by Devadatta, then why does he even criticize us? So when we look at ourselves from the viewpoint of others, as a compassionate person, we should actually be working for them. But then rather than working for them, sometimes we, in our attitude, we think that others are just objects of use for us. We use them for our own purpose. So from their perspective, if we are indeed a compassionate person, we should be working for their sake rather than using them or abusing them, criticizing them, and so forth. So if we sentient beings do not come into the benefit of having our faults repaired by Devadatta, then why he has even criticized us? What are the qualities of the Bodhisattva doing for me? Now here, when it says for me, kind of remember that it is for us as sentient beings, right? So when we look at Devadatta, the Bodhisattva, from the point of view of us sentient being, then what is it doing for us? What are the qualities that, of that Bodhisattva doing for us? Even though the Bodhisattva Devadatta himself has qualities, they have no benefit for us sentient beings.
Ngandrun dubi kan neban rola ninji mebandi chela yonde lembegins keba tala dowarndus.
And the next verse in the section that explains how to practice it once you have thought about this is, with no compassion for migrating beings who dwell in the mouth of poisonous bed migrations. Externally is proud of his good qualities and wishes to harm the wise.
Terdadi kaso da ngandru dubi kan neba rola ninji mebandi chela yonde lembegins sagdi 오늘 전에 다직 냠타비기 다직 심전 참여봐 비기다 아니 두비 칼라야 내대바디 텔라야 닌지 메바디 아니 텔라야 닌지께 마투야디 아니 계란기 치죽라야 직 아니 잔주선비기 아니 수름 송을 소바 인세 라데버마도 대응 오말이야 아니 계란이야 아니 잔주선비기 다직 수름기 아니 저마점에 메비기 견레스 로
So we put ourselves in the shoes of these countless impoverished, weak sentient beings who are experiencing suffering. When we look at ourselves from their perspective and look at our behavior, then from their perspective, we're incapable of treating them with compassion. So we as bodhisattvas, we might pretend as if we are practicing the ethics of bodhisattvas. But really, when we look at it from the perspective of those other impoverished, poor, weak, suffering sentient beings, we're just pretending. We're feigning the practice of bodhisattvas, but really, we have no compassion to them.
Rani la warda rani ani pigi 간기 숨전 나올라야 펜바 메제바 마세 펜바 메제바 마세 칠라 랑기 연대진들 렘바예 아니 다자 수수기오 숨전 케바탈라 도르데바티스 사버은 되지 님버체바 미리바오스
We're not even sensing the smell of Bodhisattva's ethics with this attitude. So the commentary says, with respect to this, to verse 146, further, Devadatta, who has no compassion for migrators held in the mouth of lower realms, poisonous snakes and animals due to degenerated ethics and views, not only does not benefit us sentient beings, but it purposefully wishes to outdo us proficient sentient beings out of his exaggerated view of his own qualities. It is inappropriate to exaggerate and criticize. Having placed the mind on sentient beings and taken oneself, the Bodhisattva, as others, contemplate that it is unsuitable for him to harm oneself.
Niba nyambalan densum gomsula she. The deep hardo Jazurumachigi and Tado gomsulia, Jardoas, Shonti. Tanyambalan densum gomsula she, Ninkurlan Dembata, Yonden Jabalan Dembata, Lake Vietnamjan Dembata, Nebala Javala Gawakibos.
Now, as we follow the commentary of Getz Damarinchen, from verse 141 to 146, he explained the way jealousy for those higher than oneself is cultivated. Now, from verse 147, we begin the section that explains the way competitiveness is cultivated between those equal to oneself, and there are 4 points made in this section. Competing over material gain and honor, competing over the reputation of one's qualities, competing over the list of one's goodnesses, and developing a like for dispensing harm.
Tamunyin kurlan dembani, Datan Yamla Tönini, Kangi Rani Lashir, Dagi Nida Kurtini, Serva Yejan Evadrus.
Well, we begin with competing over material gain and honor in verse 147. It says, in order that we are surpassed, is regarded as equal to us. Sorry, in order that we may surpass he who is regarded as equal to us, we shall definitely attain possessions and honor for ourselves, even through dispute.
Simjen, Daja Simjen da Rigla Sobi, Nyambi, Chanchu Sambala Tunen, Nieba the Kurdi, Nieba the Yonden so Kanki, Chansam Tele, Simjen Ran and Labar Chavicher, Dagi Nieba the Kurdini, Chansam Engine Deda, Serva Yega, Neba Drubber Chavos.
In the commentary, it says, we shall compete with the Bodhisattva Devadatta, who is equal to us in being a sentient being, for status and the like, so that we sentient beings are superior in gain, praise, and the like to the Bodhisattva Devadatta. We establish our praise and gain even through dispute with the Bodhisattva.
Redadi Jansamti, Chanju Sambalaya, Chanju Sambagi, Chanju Sambi, and Simjing to Kandas Shigdu, Simjing to Kandas Sambudu, Tenang Shingi, Chanju Sambatapan Dam Chene, and Chigba in Sambik, Ra, and Nyamba in Sambik, Titoni, and Jansam Kigori, Sungwas Dadi, Ra, Chigba in Sadi, Sangi Rioba, Ra. 아니 비게 토송 공수 제바이나 아니 제투야 니바 여바디 아니 잔주삼바다 간줄이야 아니 케바 칸에 메바스 로 잔주삼비 투살이야 간주 마투야 제당 규경 차니 아니 케바 칸에 여말 진짜 소수 배준 제마질이야 투그레마도 아니 케바 메바 병급인들 케바 메반자 아니 딘디 싸움니 아니 비길이야 전주 셈발이야 댄치는 니버 두고 그랬어 심징돼
So then in putting ourselves in the Bodhisattva Devadatta's shoes, we then look at Devadatta. I mean, actually, let's start with that. We are the Bodhisattva Devadatta. We put ourselves in somebody else's shoes and then look at ourselves and think, how is it benefiting us? How is it benefiting us as sentient beings? What does it think about us? Particularly when we sentient beings are equal in terms of qualities to this Bodhisattva, then we're equal to that Bodhisattva in terms of having Buddha nature. We're equal in terms of having the ability to study, reflect, and meditate. There's no difference between ourselves and this Bodhisattva Devadatta in our ability to do that. We can make effort in order to attain qualities which are higher than Devadatta. In this way, competitiveness for those equal to oneself is cultivated.
다 연된 잡발란 덴바세디 연된 잡발라 라 진니 다기 연된니 직된 콜라 싸왔다 이제는 디 연된 kan 수견 토범 맹규르차스
Next point is competing over the reputation of one's qualities in verse 148. So again, we're competing with those who are equal to oneself. So in verse 148, it says, by all means, we shall make clear to the entire world the good qualities we have, but we shall not let anyone hear of any of his good qualities.
어디 인서다 여러분직 빼자단디 빼나스 아니 총강 직버직견직 총강이 여봐이나 그 비기 총제다 직 사자다 저 참아 직버 여봐이네야 총강 직난기 잘라디 아니 명예 빼 망불레기 여봐 직난이야 마요 아들이 용초거 왔어 그 가르쳐 버셔스라운디 총강 직입에 아니 멜란 데와시야다 캬브다치에 야부 여벌 때니 그 잘라도 총투거라스 잠바디기 아니 가양 비기 젠라야 데와마치 캬브다마치 샤즈디 밀레고 마르스 라 베티레스타.
Now, Isona says, with respect to this idea that you compete with those of equal qualities, it says that thinking about it, that competitiveness with equal, if you think about it in terms of two shops, those two shops sell the same thing. They do the same business. They sell the same things. One shop is successful, the other one is not successful. The shop that is successful is good in its public relation, right? So it treats its customers well. It is good in marketing. The second shop does not treat its customers well. It's not good in its relations with the public, and also it doesn't have good marketing. So you can read it in a similar way with respect to competitive with those equal to oneself.
다디난신기 당안주 비기기 잔주선비귤이야 아니 신진징기 상로 디어러스 신진징기 상로 요온디 랑기 연된 칸여버디 신라 째친 아니 베나 캬브다도 마소나 아니 슈크쳔부 제온디기 아니 랑신니기기 비기기 다지 랑기 연된디 아니 직된 꼴라야 캬브드야지다 아니 디기 참말라 펜토토게 진거레스 아 다 랑친징기 톰댕이 ngandawa기 아니 랑라 칸여버디다 아니 셀 투기요 말스 직대나야 아니 셀 투기요 말에 아니 지 셴라야 펜도시 투기요 말에 아니 디마투디 랑기 연딩기 비기 데브 톱샤 타두버디야 토무토 뉴트로 그랬어 간지
셴라 셀 투기요 말했어요.
셴라 펜토고 말했어.
So similarly, when we think of the meaning of that, when oneself as a bodhisattva has an attitude of cherishing others in the mind stream, they can use that in order to provide others with qualities, in order to help others, in order to benefit all sentient beings. And with an attitude of self-cherishing, we cannot do that. One cannot do that. One cannot share the good qualities. One cannot eliminate or dispel the suffering of others when one is controlled by a self-cherishing attitude.
Chinis, Dacha Giondinis, Jigdin Kunla Labor Dashin, Sarwatan said, Dacha di, Shenlasha. Shen Chansem Dion de Sadi, Ranjak, Rangi, and a piggy, Taji, Ranjin Zingi, Ongi, Jengi, Dedulia, Salomatandi, and Shenda, touching Javachon Drogrosra, and Dindrondi, Rangi Yondin Digi, Ranlaya Pemado, Shenlaya Pemado, Sugan Topomingo, Teta Chirogores.
Shaza Dr. said the Shenra. Now, looking at the commentary to this section, it says, I shall proclaim and make clear our qualities by means to all the transitory worlds. And further, I shall take care that nobody hears about the qualities of this bodhisattva. Now, when the section says I, think about it as thinking as you are being other sentient beings. So rather than I, we shall proclaim and make clear our qualities by any means to all the transitory worlds. And further, we should take care that nobody hears about the qualities of this bodhisattva, which is actually we ourselves as Devadatta, right? So we put ourselves in somebody else's shoes, looking at who we are, Devadatta, and says that we will make clear that our qualities by means of by any means to all the transitory worlds, and also we shall take care that nobody hears about the qualities of this person, Devadatta.
Tasumba legbi namdan lan dembanis, legbi namdan lan dembani, dagi kenya be chashi, dan chugyur delamin, dadi nipa lenyicha, dan kungyur delamins.
And then the next verse, 149, is coming under the heading of competing over the list of one's goodnesses. Also, we shall hide our faults. We shall be venerated, not him. We will find a great deal of possessions today. We will be honored, not him.
Jeng cholaya deyonza da sedi jenchon tsulagores ra ani jenchoni tinza da sedi jenchoni da gi kyen besagi ani jengi kyen yobadi pa becheni ani jenlaya chobar kirgores jenlaya kurdicheya weba ani chobar kirba kanji dal chokir sadi dadi nega ran ani jeng saldenza dadi jenchagores tan dila means la ondi ran la ya ran chi bi ani da chinzingi kombete te la ya dila ani chi choba chusa we mares ro.
So again, when we think of this verse that says, also, we shall hide our faults. We will be venerated, not him. We will find a great deal of possessions today, and we will be honored, not him. We think of ourselves, an individual, and putting ourselves in the shoes of other living beings, other sentient beings. And as we now become other, we think that we shall hide our faults. Not only our faults will not be known to others, others will only see our good qualities and praise us. Looking at the commentary, I shall hide our, which means we shall hide our faults, which means sentient beings' faults, but clearly proclaim his faults, which means that him, the other person, Devadatta, which is a being that is full of a self-cherishing attitude, we will expose their faults. And in this way, we, the sentient beings, become an object of offering for others, and he will not.
Simjin dagi kyoyan bebar chashins. Simjin dagi kyoyan bebar chashin. Di kyoyan sabar dhani. Ani shengi kyoyan beche. Kanji dodo di shengi kyoyan beche. Rangi kyoyan dhache. Ani simjin shen chobar kyowa chashins. Chobi jesu yorang nele sha. Dila tedar cheba mamba. Bebar chawas. Sosula ya tindi machiwa. Kanji ani odus chin tambeba chego gores.
So then as we take the position that now we are other sentient beings, we think that we're going to hide our fault. We're going to be renowned. We're going to get the praise. We're going to get the offering. We're going to get the honor. But the other Bodhisattva, Devadatta, will not. So in the commentary, it says, we shall hide our, which means sentient beings' fault, but clearly proclaim his fault. And is in this way, we, the sentient beings, become an object of offering for others, and he will not. We shall drive in this way. We are obtaining today much good food, clothing, and the like, and others should praise us. But he, that person, Devadatta, shall not receive these benefits.
Direja tapena rangi rangla ya kyen joba ina. Rangi rangla kyen joba ta rang pigi ani yengi sal deni rangla kyen joba nimbo di lui toni keban rogyo sares. Chedan rangi rangla ya kyen joba ina ani leg bichajre rede ina ya rang yengi chola ya decheni rangla kyen jondi gacha gatamba rangla ya chik magawada and dindichik yungyosares. That dille tubaino and tanda ngoma the chagors ranchin singedeleya and Kasatan Gobja Shubadi Dikurgores ra.
So think about the way that Shantideva is using this practice. For example, in terms of expressing the faults or speaking the faults of ourselves. So we can admit our own faults. We can express our own faults. If the same faults are expressed by someone else, we react to that differently, right? So so we have here two situations. Either we admit our faults or the faults are expressed by others. It seems that our reaction to those faults being spoken of is different. We react more strongly. We dislike others speaking about our faults. We react that more strongly should we ourselves, in comparison with we ourselves, admitting them. So here Shantideva is using this method, eliciting kind of a stronger reaction in order to put down our own sense of self-cherishing.
Jaya di kalakaworoch, Lola Mading in Roch. You had the Kasana Nanzu, Ken Jaya di Ra, Hardun, mean Dunlaya, Chiksusu, Kenji Jogochon, Kalakaweros, there, Ra. One chin Ken to Jena, Mishamaji Kenji Tombana, any Lamsan Jaya Layape, any Tesson Meba Jotudos, Ra. Hina Susu Ken to Joma to the Carres. Kansan di ranjinzi shukchi chawanza jotugo maros tinza ta ini rangi sheng kosala deni anchi rangi la su kyenta su lojong di kalkhago bechaya di din saros ro.
So think about it. We might be able to criticize ourselves in the sense of we admit our faults. We criticize ourselves. But we find it much harder to face criticism from others. if it's the same criticism being waged, it's easier for us to deal with it if we are the one who is doing the criticism. Whereas if others say exactly the same thing, we find it quite difficult. So look at this practice of mind training that Shantideva is teaching here. We put ourselves in somebody else's shoes, look at our own shortcomings and criticize them. It's quite hard to practice it as a mind training exercise.
어디에서다 쉐바 찍록샤인다. 쉐바 네발 자와 라 가와케바니 된 마론 쳬발라 유리 단 가베타 드와군지 셰게 단 펜좀 해봐 다도 차스.
Verse 150 comes under the heading of developing a like for dispensing harm. It reads, "For a long time I shall look with pleasure at his being made sinful. He will become the laughingstock of all migrating beings and be derided amongst all."
장섬 렌진드는 마론시 라버 쳬발 유림 파트 다니 가베타버 차오 장섬드는 로군지 셰게 진네단 펜주군지 견제비 페바타도 차오시 다신 젠 심진 신퇴제 라니 연딘 길롬바 가버 차오스.
The commentary to this section says, "I shall watch joyously for a long time how this Bodhisattva Devadatta is being treated inappropriately and is being crushed. I shall take care that this Bodhisattva is a laughingstock for all migrating beings or all migrators, and they abuse each other by criticizing each other's faults. Having exchanged self, another one thus praises sentient beings and stops to exaggerate one's qualities."
데르다 딩안도 깔카고 로지 차디 남긴댕이다 베나다 소소로지나 남긴댕기 엔지 로종 디 톨이야 베조 마치디 아니 다 테스틱 랍고나 랍마데버로 차디 라 원니기 디 톨이야 컴리댕이 좀바이나 아니 디 레라우 슈인 사레스.
The section is quite hard, right? Particularly if we usually don't make efforts to put this particular mind training practice into action. It's quite hard even to express it, to teach it to others, to speak about it. But then when you start to put it into practice as a mind training practice, then describing it to others, Geshe reckons, becomes much easier.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sure.
For today. Gewadi nyududa lama sangye drugyune drowachi kyamalupa de salago parasho chanchu semchu rinpoche make panam kegyuchi keba nyampa mepayam gone gondu pewa sho kanri rawe kowe shinkam pendan dewa malu jungwe ne chenre siwan tenzen gyatso e shape site badu tengyuchi Tup tu chan shin jang gung gyan we ten zin kyong pe we kun zo do po tse cho sun ko we le mun tu du pa ha da so du je gun du shak den sho.